if we are going to move to a higher plane, I would to submit to you, and I would take the position that we have to assume some greater risk. Because if we do not assume greater risk, we run the risk of either remaining where we are or going back in time or becoming irrelevant. And we'll become irrelevant not because we may have not gone backwards, but because we now live in a global society. And there are other groups and individuals who want to move forward. They don't want to remain where they are, and they want to go forward. And so on the interstate of life, if we don't want to assume greater risk, if we don't want more, if we don't want to do more, if we don't want to aspire for more, you can remain where you are, but you will lose ground or become irrelevant because there are others who will pull on the other side of you and they will pass you by. And you can't blame them for passing you by if you yourself choose not to go faster. So the question today for us as we celebrate Juneteenth is, what group do you fall in? What group do you fall in? What group do you want to be in? And that's a question we must ask ourselves. What group do you want to fall in? Chris Preston, I submit to you, comes out of the group who says, I want to thank General Granger for the order. I got the order. And I want to be educated. And I got educated. And I've gone to some of the finest schools. But I want more. And I don't want to wait 30, 40, 50 years for it. I'm ready now. I'm offering myself now. And I hope you will join with me to make it happen. And I submit to you, those who stand in his group will do more, achieve more, go further, and be much happier down the road. I just believe that. Education is important. And that's not just about the books. It's not just about, yes, I went to Harvard, but I could still go to Harvard and still walk around with a slave mentality. I just have a good label, a good name, a good school, but the question is what I would do with it. Okay? So it's not just about what school you go to. It's not just about how smart you think you are. The question is, what do you do with the education that you receive? And whether or not you hold it for yourself or whether or not you extend it to someone else. What do you use? What do you do with what you got? And I believe that's where we are today. Education continues to be important, but we've got to do something with it. Business becomes important. It's just not enough just to make a decent income. And there are a lot of folk just barely making a minimum wage, barely making it, okay? But we still have to aspire to be our own businessmen, our own businesswomen, to be entrepreneurs. I'll never forget, I used to ride the bus from Acres Home, the 4-4, from the north side, downtown. And as a kid, I would walk up and down Main Street and Travis and Louisiana, and I would look at those tall buildings as a kid. And I was motivated by what I saw. I saw these big buildings, huge buildings. And as a kid, I said to myself, one of these days, I want to be in one of those buildings. I want to be in one of those buildings. That was a dream that I had as a kid. I used to ride the bus on a regular basis downtown just to walk up and down the street. And I said, one of these days, I want to be in one of those buildings. And so when Barry and I formed the law firm 31 years ago, and we asked ourselves, where do we want to set up shop? It had always been my dream to be downtown in one of those buildings. And so we moved into the Lyric Center, 1100 Louisiana. And I told Barry, I want to be as high up as I can get there. And so we moved on the 50th floor. And we looked all over the city of Houston. And I looked out of that window and I said, Lord, I thank you. For 8 years, we were on the 11th floor. But let me just give you a little funny bit. After 8 years and the rent started going up, Barry said, have we been up here long enough? Then we moved to the Lyric Center, to the 18th floor. But the reality is, we are still downtown. Because as a kid, that was my hope. That was my vision. That was my goal. That was my dream. And now it's incumbent upon all of us to help to create dreams in the lives of our children. I believe one of the reasons why our children are doing some of the things that they are doing, children, young adults, those a little bit younger than myself, is because they're not driven by dreams. They're not driven by their hopes and their aspirations. They don't see themselves beyond where they are. And so they're not striving for much. And those of us in this room, the leaders in this room, and all of us are leaders that are in this room, through our own lives and our own experiences, we have to give people hope and give them visions and help to create aspirations with them. Some people ask, Sylvester, why have you stayed in Acres Home all these years? Why are you still there? And for me, and I'm not saying it applies to everybody, it's just for me. For me, in the neighborhood where I grew up, there was the principal, there were the teachers, there were the business owners. When I walked down Stallings or Macquarie, I ran into George Smith, the pipe owner, right there in my neighborhood. And there was something about him. Something about him. People kept saying he owns his own business. But for me, he was a motivator. And I saw him almost every day. Because in my neighborhood, that's where he was. And the teachers and the principals were right there. So when I came back, I said, I want to be very close to the same neighborhood in which I was born and reared. Because oftentimes it's not what you say that convinces folk. It's what they see. And so when there was this multi-development apartment complex in front of where we live. Willie is right here in this room tonight, one of my neighbors. And the kids broke out the boards between the apartments and where we live. And about 7 young guys came through. I was out in the yard one Saturday. And the guys were walking down the street. And I heard they were having a conversation, they were talking. And one of the guys said, he lives right over there. And they kept talking. And when they got close, they kept saying, he lives right there. So one guy said, Mister, what's your name? I said, Sylvester Turner. He turned from me and said, I told you. The man lived right there. And they proceeded to have their own conversation. The point that I want to make is that we sometimes have to give our kids and those younger than us, we have to give them pictures that they can see, pictures that they can identify with. And we've sometimes got to be closer to them sometimes than what we want to be. But it's not about us. It's about the future and the legacy and the lives to come down the road. And sometimes, no matter how smart we may be, no matter how much money we may make, sometimes we have to be close enough to them that they can touch us and see us and realize that they too can be right there. I close with this. I am very blessed. I have been very blessed. I have a mom, many of you know. My mom, come August the 12th, will be 90 years old. For 10 years, my mom has suffered with Alzheimer's. 10 years, my mom has suffered with Alzheimer's. 5.5 years ago, the doctors told us to put my mom in hospice. We took my mom home. We took her back to the house that my daddy purchased in 1954. Put her right back in her surroundings. And because, and Ron, them have heard my story, because her children are educated, and because most of her children are working, we're able to put providers around with my mom 24/7. And I believe in large part, God's blessing, my mom is still here. But we can afford to do it. And we can afford to do it because our children are working, because our children are educated, and because our children can help pay the tab. But we owe that to folk who came before us because we are standing on their shoulders. And the education that we receive is not so much for me or for us, but it's be able to use to benefit the lives of someone else. And so I am grateful to have been in the legislature for 25 years. I enjoy it. I enjoy it to this day. I enjoy it. But I also believe that there comes a point when you have to decide whether or not you have expended your best, whether or not you have maximized your potential, or whether or not you have more to give. And if you believe you can do more, if you believe you can offer more, then you have to be willing to step beyond your own comfort zone and go much higher. Together, I believe we can make a difference. I close with this story, and let me use this example. You know why geese fly in formation? Let me tell you why as I go to my seat. Geese will fly in formation, sometimes like a V. And you got that lead goose up at front. And the lead goose will be flying, and you notice they start quacking behind. They start making all that noise. You know why they make that noise? They make that noise to encourage the lead goose to maintain his altitude and to keep his flying speed. Because every time the lead goose gets a little tired, the other geese behind him quack to encourage the lead goose to maintain his height. Because as long as the lead goose remains high and strong, the rest of them will fly right behind him. And then when the lead goose gets a little tired and can no longer do what he's been doing, the lead goose will fall back in formation, and somebody else from the back will come to the front. And the rest of them will start quacking behind him for him to maintain his altitude. And then when the lead goose strengthens himself, he resumes his position in front. And the one in the front goes back into formation, and they keep flying right along. My brothers and sisters, if we operate together, if we don't mind who's the lead goose, and if we encourage those who are in front, I promise you, we'll maintain our speed and we'll maintain our altitude. And we have to understand that every now and then, even the lead goose will have to give ground, and someone else will have to go to the front. I don't know about you, but I intend to be a lead goose for a little longer. And I hope you will quack behind me. And if we do that, we can do great things. On your set, mark your set, and let's go. Happy Juneteenth to everyone.